Hello and welcome to the webinar. Today's topic is the state of ransomware in 2023. This special webinar event is brought to you in partnership thanks to our friends at Sophos. This is a critical topic. The companies out there around the world today, ransomware is continuing to evolve and adversaries are now able to consistently execute attacks at scale. This is the biggest cyber risk facing organizations today. And on this event, you'll gain fresh insights into the reality of ransomware from 3,000 IT professionals working in the front line. I'm excited to be introducing you to our expert presenter here in just a moment. But first, I should mention my name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm glad to be serving as your host. On this event, we want to help you to get your questions answered, so we encourage your questions there in the electronic questions box. And experts from Sophos are standing by to answer your questions, so keep those questions coming. I also want to encourage you to check out the Handouts tab. It's there that you'll find some special resources that you can use to learn more about today's topic. And then finally, at the end of the webinar, we'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $250 prize. If you're watching this event on demand or recorded, of course, that drawing would have already occurred. And with that, it's now my pleasure to bring in today's expert presenter. I'm excited to welcome Sally Adam, who's the Senior Director of Marketing at Sophos. Sally, it's great to have you on. Take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. In this webinar, you're going to get insights into the state of ransomware in 2023. I'm Sally Adams, Senior Director of Marketing at Sophos, responsible for our ransomware market research. I'm going to be sharing the findings of an exclusive study that reveals the prevalence, the root cause, the cost, and the impact of ransomware. And we're going to take a look at how different industries and different countries stack up. And we're going to look at some historical trends leveraging our surveys from previous years. In terms of the research, well, we commissioned an independent survey of 3,000 leaders responsible for IT and cybersecurity across 14 countries. All respondents were from organizations with between 100 and 5,000 employees, and we had a full range of company revenue splits from less than $10 million to over $5 billion. The research was conducted between January and March 2023, and we asked the respondents to share their experiences of ransomware over the previous 12 months. Diving a little deeper, you can see here in this chart on the left the countries we surveyed and the number of respondents in each. And you can also see the size of respondents by company, both number of employees on the top and annual revenue on the bottom. So that's the survey. Let's now start looking at the findings. And the first headline is that the percentage of organizations hit by ransomware in the last years remained level, as 66% of respondents said their organization experienced an attack, the same as in our 2022 survey. In the last year, there's been a step change in the cybercrime business model, particularly the growth of the as-a-service model, such as ransomware as a service. And this has lowered the barriers to entry for would-be attackers, and it's also increased the quality of the attacks. And with ransomware attacks continuing at this level for a second year, it's clear that adversaries are able to consistently execute attacks at scale. So let's look now at the attack rate by country and how it's changed over the last year. The 2022 figure is in the lighter blue, the 2023 figure is the darker blue on the right. And while, as we saw, the overall ransomware rate has remained flat, there are variations at a country level. The United States reported a 10-point increase in attacks, up from 58% to 68% of organizations hit. So the US has gone from being below average to slightly above average. Singapore reported the highest rate of attacks overall in this year's study, with 84% of organizations being hit in the previous year. Conversely, the UK reported the lowest rate of attack, coming in at 44%. And in fact, the UK was the only country where fewer than half of respondents had experienced an attack. When we split the ransomware attack rate data by sector, we can see that education reported the highest rates of ransomware attacks of all industries that we surveyed in 2023. Lower education, so K-12, primary, secondary, elementary, high schools, essentially those that cater for under 18s, they reported 80% of attacks. So 80% of organizations had experienced an attack in the previous year, whilst in higher education, it was 79%. So education in the top two positions in terms of the frequency of experiencing a ransomware attack. Now, education has traditionally struggled with resourcing and budgets for cybersecurity, and it's likely that adversaries are targeting this sector because they know it's less well defended. And because of the resource shortages, human and technological, education can struggle to reduce the attack surface and threat exposure. So when adversaries hunt for exposed organizations, for example, they're scanning the web to find open connections, they're more likely to come across education providers. And also the shortages mean that education is often less well equipped to automatically block an attack when it does come. It's interesting to see that IT, telecoms and technology reported the lowest rate of attack, far over on the right side of the chart. This is a sector that is traditionally well funded, well equipped for cybersecurity. They've got strong defenses and can reduce their risk and exposure and defend well against attacks. As a result, they've got a ransomware attack rate that's considerably below average, coming in at 50%. We wanted to also have a look and see what the impact of organization size was on the rate of ransomware attack. And we did this in two ways, looking at the number of employees and also annual revenue. And when we look at the number of employees, the bullets that we've got on the left side of this chart here, there's very little pattern. Yes, there's a spike in the 1,000 to 3,000 group, but no real trend. But when we look based on revenue, which is the chart on the right here, we can see a clear relationship between annual revenue and propensity to experience a ransomware attack, with the percentage of organizations hit by ransomware increasing progressively with revenue. 56% of organizations with revenue of 10 to 50 million experienced a ransomware attack in the last year, and this rises to 72% of those with revenue of 5 billion plus. This data also makes clear that in the context of organization size, annual revenue is a much greater indicator of likelihood of experiencing an attack than number of employees. So we've had a look at the attack rate cut a number of different ways. Let's now take a look at how those attacks started, the root cause. And this chart here shows the root cause of attack across the 1,974 organizations that had experienced a ransomware incident last year. Top of the list is exploited vulnerabilities, the most common root cause reported in 36% of incidents, followed pretty closely by compromised credentials, which was the root cause of 29% of those ransomware attacks. Now, these findings align almost exactly with the findings from Sophos's retrospective analysis for 152 ransomware incidents that our incident responders were brought in to remediate. In our internal analysis, 37% started with exploited vulnerabilities, 30% with compromised credentials. So two very different data sources, two very similar results. Email was the root cause in quite a few attacks. 18% started with malicious email and 13% started with phishing. And I'm aware, obviously, that a phishing attack could then lead to compromised credentials. So there is an interplay going on here. 3% of attacks started with brute force and just 1% with a download. When we analyze the root cause of attack by annual revenue, we can see that exploited vulnerabilities, which is the darker blue columns on this chart, and compromised credentials, which is the purple bars on the chart, they follow opposing propensity curves. So the highest percentage of attacks that started with an exploited vulnerability were reported in the bottom and the top revenue cohorts, dipping in the middle. And conversely, the use of compromised credentials peaks in the middle revenue cohort, whilst the lowest usage was reported in the bottom and the top revenue cohorts. So two different curves going on there. I think this suggests in part that the smallest and the largest organizations are struggling most with reducing vulnerability attack surface. Smaller revenue organizations have less budget to bring in experts to help them, and the largest revenue organizations typically have very complex IT infrastructures that are harder to control and nail down. This here is the split of root cause of attack by industry. The numbers are quite small to get everything on the chart, but I'm hoping you can see your own sector here. Media, leisure and entertainment reported the highest percentage of attacks where the root cause was an exploited vulnerability, with 55% saying that this was the cause. So some widespread gaps here. Central and federal government had the highest percentage of attacks that started with compromised credentials, 41%. Now, this may be due to a higher rate of credential theft in this sector. It may be a lower ability to prevent exploitation of stolen credentials, or a combination of the two. It's interesting to have a look at the well-resourced IT technology and telecom sector in the middle of the chart. We can see that they've really reduced adversaries' ability to exploit vulnerabilities and credentials, with only 22% of attacks starting with each of these approaches. As a result, over half of their ransomware incidents started with email, as adversaries are forced to focus on exploiting humans to get inside the organization. So we've looked at the attack rates, we've looked at how those attacks started. Let's now take a look at what comes next. Did the data get encrypted? So over the last 4 years, we've been asking organizations that have been hit by ransomware whether the cyber criminals succeeded in encrypting their data. This here is the responses from our 2020, 2021 and 22 surveys, when 73%, 54% and 65% respectively said yes, their data was encrypted. So what happened this year? Well, in 2023, 76% said yes, their data was encrypted. Sadly, encryption is now at the highest ever rate. This likely reflects the ever-increasing skill level of adversaries who continue to innovate and refine their approaches. If we look at that orange bar, we can see that the percentage of extortion-only attacks with no encryption continues to decline, coming in now at just 3%. On the face of it, this is good news, but hold the thought because we're going to dive into that in a bit more detail in a moment. I want to take a look at that data split by industry. And when we do that, we can see that almost all sectors struggle to stop attacks before data can be encrypted. With just one exception, in every sector, over 2/3 of attacks resulted in data encryption. The highest frequency of data encryption, 92% of attacks, was reported by business and professional services. IT, technology and telecoms is again the sector that bucks the trend, with adversaries succeeding in encrypting data in fewer than half, just 47% of attacks. This is another indicator of the high level of cyber defenses and response preparation in this sector. We saw before that extortion-only attacks have dropped. As I said, on the face of it, this is good news. But when we dive deeper, we can see that there's actually a strong trend for double dipping by attackers, where they both steal data and they encrypt it. So not one or the other, but both. Of the organizations that had data encrypted, 30% said their data was also stolen. So putting that another way, in 3 in 10 successful ransomware attacks, data was stolen as well as encrypted. Stealing data gives adversaries additional opportunities to monetize the attack. In addition to trying to get a ransom payment to decrypt the data, they can sell the data or threaten to make it public unless payment is made. So we've looked at how many organizations had data encrypted. Let's now look at how many got that data back. And the good news is that 97% of organizations that had data encrypted got some data back. And given the prevalence of ransomware that we're seeing in this study, it's good to know that organizations are able to respond. Now, I should make clear, they may not have got all of their data back, but they at least got some of their data back. When it comes to how they did it, 70% used backups, 46% paid the ransom, and 2% said they used other means. Now, clearly, this adds up to more than 100%. And in fact, 21% said they used multiple methods in parallel to restore their data. So they, for example, paid the ransom and used backups as well. Looking at how those numbers compare with previous years, this chart shows ransom payment rate, which is that lighter blue line, and the backup rate, the darker blue line, for the last few years. We can see that after increasing for 2 years, the ransom payment rate has remained level at 46%. But over the last year, the use of backups has dropped down from 73% last year to 70% this year. Now, this is only a small percentage drop, but it is really concerning because backups are the best and the cheapest way to restore data. So to see any decline is really concerning. And as we go forward, I'm going to give you a lot more evidence to support the use of backups wherever possible. This chart here compares ransom payment rate and backup use across the different sectors. Again, the lighter blue is the percentage that paid the ransom. The darker blue is those that used backups. And as before, they're not mutually exclusive. As you can see, business and pro services reported the highest rate of backup use, with 90% using them to recover data. But it also reported one of the highest rates of ransom payment. So while they're using backups, they are perhaps struggling to actually be able to restore their data from those backups. And if you recall, this is the sector most likely to have data encrypted in an attack. Distribution and transport reported the lowest rate of backup use, with fewer than half using backups to restore data. And in fact, this is the only sector where more people paid the ransom than used backups. So distribution and transport, I hope those columns are switched the other way around when we run the study next year. The unfortunate title of the most frequent ransom payer goes to the central and federal government sector, where 65% that had data encrypted said they paid the ransom. Now, I was surprised by this one. But I'm not surprised that the prize for the lowest rate of ransom payment goes to IT, telecoms, and technology. They have the second highest rate of backup use, but they're also able to use those backups to get up and running. They're not being forced to pay the ransom. So clearly, really well prepared for these attacks. We've looked at the sector split when it comes to paying the ransom versus using backups. Let's now take a look at how that is impacted by annual revenue. And generally speaking, as annual revenue increases, so does the propensity of an organization to recover data by paying the ransom. At the same time, frequency of backup use drops. Again, in this chart, the ransom is the light blue column, and that generally trends up as we move to the right, while the backup use is the dark blue column, which trends down as revenue increases. Organizations with lower annual revenue have less money to fund ransom payments, forcing them to focus on backups for data recovery. At the same time, larger revenue organizations typically have complex IT infrastructures, which may make it harder for them to use backups to recover data in a timely fashion. They're also, frankly, the businesses most able to buy their way out of the situation. Changing tack for a moment, I want to look at the impact of cyber insurance. Now, cyber insurance is a hot topic, and of course, cyber defenses and cyber coverage are very closely linked. And in fact, 91% of the respondents to the study said their organization has some form of cyber insurance. So I'm looking at the impact of having cyber insurance on ransomware recovery. So the first finding from the study is that organizations with cyber insurance are considerably more likely to recover encrypted data than those without a policy. But it makes very little difference what type of policy you have, because 98% with a standalone policy and 97% with a wider insurance policy said they got some data back. In comparison, 84% without a cyber policy were able to recover encrypted data. Now, I think there's a few things behind these numbers. Firstly, cyber insurance typically requires organizations to have backups and recovery plans as conditions of coverage. So organizations with cyber coverage are better prepared to recover from an attack. Also, insurers can guide ransomware victims through the recovery process in order to optimize their outcomes. Plus, frankly, organizations with cyber insurance are more likely to pay the ransom to recover data than those without a policy. Let me dive into that last point in a little bit more detail. This slide here shows ransom payment rate based on insurance coverage. Those with a standalone policy are almost 4 times more likely to pay the ransom than those that don't have a cyber insurance policy. Also, standalone cyber insurance policy holders are much more likely to pay the ransom than those who've got a wider business insurance policy that covers cyber. So some really interesting insights here into the relationship between ransom payment and cyber insurance. Talking about ransoms, let's have a look at the actual ransom amount, how much was paid to the adversaries. So 216 respondents shared the actual ransom paid, and the mean average comes in at just over $1.5 million, and the median was $400,000. Now, these numbers are interesting on their own, but what's particularly interesting is when we compare them with last year. While the overall propensity to pay a ransom has remained flat versus last year, again, remaining steady at 46% of respondents, the payments themselves have increased considerably in the last year. The mean payment has almost doubled, whilst the median, the most common payment, has increased 5-fold. Now, in both this year's study and last year's study, there was a broad spread of ransom payments reported. And so I want to break down the ransom payments in a bit more detail. This chart shows the 2022 payments in light blue and the 2023 payments in dark blue. And while both years had respondents at the top and the bottom of the chart, so in both years there were people who paid less than $1,000 ransom and more than $5 million in ransom, the percentage paying the bigger ransoms has increased this year. In fact, this year 40% reported paying ransoms of $1 million or more, compared to just 11% last year. And conversely, at the other end of the scale, last year, 54% of ransom payments were less than $100,000. This year, it's down to a third, 34%, so quite considerable drop. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the largest revenue organizations were most likely to pay the highest ransoms, reflecting also that adversaries will adjust the amount they will accept based on ability to pay. Now, I should say that the study didn't distinguish between payments funded internally and those funded by the insurance providers. So we've had a look at the ransom payments. Let's now take a look at the overall recovery costs, excluding the ransoms, which I think is actually the most relevant and useful number for everybody here. Now, our 2021 survey had an average recovery cost of $1.85 million. This dropped to $1.4 million last year. Want to take a guess as to what happened this year? Well, if you guessed that the recovery costs increased, you'd be right, coming in on average at $1.82 million, almost the same as in our 2021 study. Those averages, cover a lot of different types of organizations. So I think this chart is actually really helpful. It shows a mean recovery cost by annual revenue. Clearly, as you can see here, costs are increasing with revenue. They start off at $165,000 for organizations with revenue of less than 10 million, rising to almost $4.5 million for organizations in the $5 billion plus annual revenue cohort. I talked earlier about using backups versus ransom payments to recover data. Well, we've crunched the numbers to understand the impact that recovery method has on overall recovery costs. And I'm pleased to say, and not a little bit relieved, that whichever way you look at it, it's considerably cheaper to use backups to recover from a ransomware attack than to pay the ransom. The mean recovery cost is almost $1 million lower for those that use backups than paid the ransom. Similarly, the median recovery cost for those that use backups, $375,000, is half the cost incurred by those that paid the ransom. And I should say that these numbers are excluding any actual ransoms themselves. So if you ever needed evidence to demonstrate the financial benefits of investing in a strong backup strategy, I think this slide is it. Diving into the business impact a little further, this splits out the loss of business revenue by those who lost a lot, which is the darker blue, and those who lost a little, which is the lighter blue. Lower education and construction and property are the two sectors most likely to have lost some business and revenue overall due to the attack. But we can see that business and pro services was most likely to say they lost a lot of business and revenue. 64% said they lost a lot. If you recall, this is the sector with the highest rate of data encryption in an attack. And again, our well-prepared IT, technology and telecom sector comes out of this very well, as it's the least likely to have lost a lot of business revenue. So what stands out here for me really is that the sector most likely to have data encrypted is the one most likely to have lost a lot of business and revenue. The sector least likely to have data encrypted is the one least likely to have lost a lot of business and revenue. This is powerful evidence to show that investing in strong cyber defenses that stop adversaries before they can complete their attacks makes wise financial sense for the business. And finally, I want to look at recovery time, how long it took organizations hit by ransomware to get back on their feet and fully up and running again. So whilst the time to recover from a ransomware attack in our 2023 study is broadly in line with that from our 2022 study, the percentage that we're able to recover in less than a day has dropped down from 14% last year to 8% this year. However, continuing my championing of backups, organizations that use backups to recover from the attack were able to do so more quickly than those that paid the ransom. 45% of those that used backups recovered within a week, compared with 39% of those that paid the ransom. And almost 1/3, so 32% that paid the ransom, took over a month to recover. And that figure for those that use backups is 23%. So again, the percentage taking a longer time is much higher for those who paid the ransom. Now, that brings us to the end of the findings. To sum up, as we have seen, ransomware remains a major threat for all organizations. The attack rate globally has leveled at 66%, with attackers able to consistently execute at scale. And as they continue to evolve their attacks, they're now encrypting data more often than ever before. While the percentage of extortion-only attacks has continued to drop, the double dip, where attackers both exfiltrate and encrypt data to increase their ability to monetize the attack, is now common. Data was also stolen in 30% of attacks where it was encrypted. And the burden that ransomware is placing on organizations has increased, with ransom payments and recovery costs both up on last year. There's also strong evidence about the benefits, operational and financial, of using backups to recover data rather than paying the ransom. The worrying thing, though, is that backup use is down compared to last year. And finally, when it comes to understanding the impact organizations' size has on experience of ransomware, revenue is much more relevant than the number of employees. So what should you do? Well, I have three broad recommendations that I'd like to share. Firstly, continue strengthening your defensive shields, particularly against those most common attack vectors that we saw today: exploited vulnerabilities and compromised credentials. Make sure you've got security tools that defend against these attack vectors. Also, look to deploy adaptive technologies that respond automatically to an attack, disrupting adversaries and buying defenders time to respond. And look to implement 24/7 threat detection, investigation and response, whether you deliver it in-house or in partnership with a specialist managed detection and response, MDR, provider. Optimize your attack preparation. It's not just about planning, it's about preparation too. This means taking regular backups, practicing recovering from those backups, and maintaining an up-to-date incident response plan that's printed out and in hard copy. So if an adversary does encrypt your files, you can still access your incident response plan. And continue to maintain good security hygiene. Timely patching and regularly reviewing your security tool configuration is as important as ever. Now, I'd like to touch just briefly on a couple of areas where Sophos can really help you elevate your defenses. Please do speak to our team to learn more about any of them. Sophos offers a full portfolio of advanced cybersecurity solutions for any environment. We secure over 550,000 organizations around the globe. Our security controls include endpoint network, email, and cloud solutions. And Sophos MDR provides 24/7 threat detection and response for Sophos and non-Sophos environments. We use the Sophos XDR platform to do this, and the platform is also available for organizations to use in-house as well. And we continue to work to enhance outcomes through automation, AI, and deep threat intelligence. Everything's available from one provider, all managed through a single cloud-based platform, and all designed to fit into your existing IT environment. So that's the portfolio. Let me dive quickly into 3 specific solutions to help mitigate the ransomware risk that we've looked at today. Your endpoint security is the foundation for your ransomware defenses. And Sophos Endpoint includes multiple techniques to block ransomware, including web protection, machine learning, and anti-exploitation. Sophos's anti-ransomware capabilities focus on the signs of encryption, irrespective of the source, meaning it is highly successful at stopping new variants or never-before-seen ransomware. And because it is looking for encryption behavior, it can even block encryption attempts from remote machines. Sophos Endpoint also has an automatic rollback mechanism, reverting files encrypted at the start of an attack to their original unencrypted state. And it uses proprietary technology rather than volume shadow copy, making it much more resilient to attackers who delete backups before launching their attacks. Now, we saw that exploited vulnerabilities was the most common root cause of attack, and Sophos Endpoint is particularly strong in this area. Enabled by default, Sophos's 60 anti-exploitation capabilities instantly protect devices from the moment of installation. There's no configuration required, no training, no fine-tuning, and these features build upon the 7 related capabilities that are enabled by Windows by default. Now, stopping today's sophisticated, well-funded adversaries requires powerful technology and 24/7 expert monitoring to identify and stop advanced human-led attacks that technology alone cannot prevent. Sophos MDR is the world's most trusted and highest-rated MDR service. We secure more organizations than any other provider, giving us deep insights into each industry segment. This also allows us to apply community immunity. So we take learnings from defending one customer and apply them automatically to all others with a similar profile. Sophos MDR is designed to meet you where you are, working with Sophos tools and with third-party tools. You don't need to be running Sophos Endpoint to benefit from our MDR service. Everybody can. Now, MDR is all about keeping you ahead of adversaries. To understand the need for MDR, we first need to look at what we're up against and how cyber threats have evolved over recent years. I'd like to start by walking you through a recent incident that Sophos incident responders were brought in to remediate. In May, an automotive supplier was hit with 3 separate ransomware attacks. All 3 started with the exploitation of the same misconfiguration, a firewall rule exposing remote desktop protocol on a management server. The first ransomware group, Lockbit, exfiltrated data to the mega cloud storage service. They used Mimikatz to extract passwords, and then they distributed their ransomware binary using PSExec, a legitimate Microsoft tool. The second group, Hive, used RDP for a second time, this time to move laterally before dropping their ransomware just 2 hours after the Lockbit threat actors. And then, as the victim was restoring their data from backups, an Alpha Black Cat affiliate accessed the network, installed Altera Agent to establish persistence, which is a legitimate remote access tool, and then exfiltrated data. And 2 weeks after the Lockbit and the Hive attacks, Alpha Black Cat distributed their ransomware and cleared Windows event logs. At this point, the organization brought in the Sophos team to investigate and remediate the incident. Now, as well as creating an ongoing nightmare for this organization, the story illustrates a number of the ways cyber attacks have evolved and why technology alone cannot stop every threat. Firstly, adversaries are frequently exploiting weaknesses in security posture to penetrate organizations. In the case of the automotive supplier, it was a misconfigured firewall rule. Another common weakness they exploit is unpatched vulnerabilities. In fact, that was the number one way adversaries got into organizations, an instance that our team was brought in to remediate last year. It was used in almost half, 47% of cases. Another approach they use commonly to avoid triggering detection technologies is to use stolen access data and credentials. These here on screen are just some examples seen by Sophos XOps. These resources are readily available on the dark web, with initial access brokers offering them up to the highest bidder. Adversaries also often use legitimate IT tools in their attacks. We saw this several times in the automotive supplier story. Now, in this picture here, the top row shows the stages of the MITRE attack framework, detailing the steps that adversaries go through as they deploy their attacks. The bottom row shows the top artifacts or tools used at each stage of the attack, as observed by Sophos incident responders over 2021. As you can see, many of the tools mentioned in the automotive attack, Mimikatz, PSExec, RDP feature here. Many of these are legitimate IT tools, PowerShell, for example, that's used by IT teams day in, day out just to do their jobs. The challenge for defenders is that automated technologies struggle to differentiate between legitimate IT staff using these tools and attackers exploiting them using stolen credentials. And just really to emphasize this point further, we saw that attackers used RDP in 83% of attacks we investigated last year. And while it is regularly used to gain external access, it is in fact most heavily used for internal movement once the adversary is inside the organization. So we face an increasingly challenging threat environment where adversaries are using tactics and techniques that take advantage of security weaknesses, they're imitating legitimate employees, and they're using legitimate IT tools to avoid being detected by security solutions. And this challenging threat landscape is impacting organizations of all sizes, not just large enterprises. 59% of IT professionals working in small and mid-sized companies saw an increase in the complexity of attacks on their organization last year. And at the same time, 57% saw an increase in the volume of attacks as adversaries take advantage of malware as a service models, AI, and automation. And almost 2/3, 66%, were hit by ransomware last year. And these attacks have considerable impact on the organization as a whole. 90% of businesses hit by ransomware said the attack impacted their ability to operate, while 86% of private sector organizations said the attack caused them to lose business or revenue. Of those who had their data encrypted in an attack, only 4% got it all back. And the overall bill for recovering from an attack came in at a huge $1.4 million. So it's a really challenging threat landscape and evolving adversary techniques. Let's take a look in that context at how MDR fits in. The reality is that technology solutions alone cannot prevent every cyber attack. We've seen how attackers use legitimate tools and security weaknesses to avoid detection by security solutions. At the same time, organizations are struggling to keep up with the volume, complexity, and impact of attacks. This is where managed detection and response comes in. MDR is a fully managed 24/7 service delivered by experts who specialize in detecting and responding to cyber attacks that technology solutions alone cannot prevent. By combining human expertise with powerful protection technologies and advanced AI-powered machine learning models, security analysts can detect, investigate, and neutralize even the most advanced human-led attacks, preventing data breaches and ransomware. Now, we need to make sure that MDR isn't confused with EDR, endpoint detection and response, and XDR, extended detection and response. While MDR, EDR, and XDR all support and enable threat hunting and response, EDR and XDR are tools that enable analysts to hunt for and investigate and neutralize potential compromise. With MDR, as security vendors, analysts are doing that on your behalf. And as their name suggests, EDR tools work with data points from endpoint protection technology, while XDR tools extend their data sources across a wider IT stack, including firewall, email, cloud, mobile security solutions, and more, to provide greater visibility and insights. And they work together. For example, at Sophos, we use our industry-leading XDR tool to deliver our MDR service. The challenges that we've seen with the threat environment is encouraging many organizations to add managed detection and response services to their cyber defenses. Gartner predicts that by 2025, half of organizations will be using MDR services. And at Sophos, our MDR offering is the fastest growing part of our portfolio, today serving over 12,000 customers around the globe. So let's now take a look at what MDR services actually do. And I'd like to walk you through a couple of real-world examples using the Sophos MDR service. When we think of MDR, I think the main focus is generally reactive threat hunting and incident response. And reactive is where the MDR analysts respond to suspicious signals in the customer's environment. Let me walk you through an example using a customer with 200 employees in the manufacturing sector in the US. So it started when our operators detected suspicious indicators in the customer's environment. Specifically, they detected tools associated with ransomware groups, along with Cobalt Strike, an adversary simulation tool that's commonly abused by adversaries. They instantly alerted the customer and started an investigation, sharing samples with Sophos XOps for detailed analysis. Within 30 minutes, they'd gained confirmation that a threat actor had got into the customer's environment and that the adversary's tactics, techniques, and procedures matched the early stages of a Cuba ransomware attack. Our team rapidly neutralized and evicted the adversary, preventing both data exfiltration and data encryption, and saving the customer hundreds and thousands of dollars of remediation cost, not to mention business interruption and lost earnings. And our team was then able to guide the customer on how to harden their defenses in order to reduce the likelihood of a similar incident in the future. So this is how MDR services enable organizations to avoid the cost, disruption, and business impact of a major breach or ransomware incident. The other side of the coin is proactive threat hunting, when analysts proactively hunt for threats following a particular trigger, which could be there's been an attack on an organization with a similar profile. For example, the MDR team observes that a pharmaceutical company has been targeted. So after remediating their incident, they then go and have a look to see if any other pharmaceutical companies are being targeted in a similar way. It could be an industry event such as Log4j. Perhaps it's a trigger from an early warning system, such as the one run by Sophos XOps. Or it could be an event in the customer's wider environment that triggers the proactive threat hunting. And using that example, I'd like to share with you another Sophos story. So we had a brand new customer just signed up to the Sophos MDR service who emailed us to say a vendor they used had been hit by ransomware, and they were worried naturally that they may be impacted. The Sophos MDR team investigated. They didn't find any ransomware, but they did find a suspicious signal. Sophos Endpoint Protection had automatically blocked a really unusual file. They shared the suspicious file sample with Sophos XOps for further investigation. And using the information they got from Sophos XOps, they were able to identify a historic banking Trojan. They ejected the adversary and then advised the customer again on how to prevent a similar incident. So that's an example of proactive threat hunting. This is not to say that traditional prevention technologies are obsolete, quite the opposite. While human-led managed detection and response is an essential layer of defense, high-quality protection technologies remain critical to effective cybersecurity. Endpoint, network, email, and cloud security technologies continue to play a vital role, and the right solutions can actually increase the effectiveness and impact of an MDR service. Firstly, not all attacks are as complex as the ones we just looked at. The vast majority can be stopped automatically, and automated protection technologies enable defenders to stay ahead of the ever-increasing volume of attacks. For example, Sophos Endpoint Protection blocks 99.98% of threats automatically. Also, one of the biggest practical challenges facing threat hunters is noise. With a high volume of signals, it can be hard to see the wood from the trees. Superior prevention technologies reduce the number of alerts that human analysts need to investigate. By enabling threat hunters to focus on fewer, more accurate detections, high-quality prevention technologies accelerate human-led threat response. And with MDR, as we've seen, human analysts use detections and signals from prevention technologies to identify and investigate suspicious activities. The higher the quality of the detections and the greater the contextual insights, the faster and better the investigation and response. So now we know what MDR services do, let's now take a look at who uses them. And the reality is that all types of organizations use MDR services, from the smallest companies without an IT team to large enterprises with in-house SOC groups. So the question is really, how do organizations work with MDR services? Some organizations want to fully outsource their threat hunting and response to MDR specialists so they can focus on their business. Others want a team who can work with their in-house team, co-managing threat response, amplifying and extending their team with additional expertise and 24/7 coverage. While others still want to be alerted to threats and get remediation guidance so that they can take action themselves. You choose how you want to work with an MDR service. And if your needs change, you can change up your model too. For example, you may be following that third model most of the time, but over the holiday period, you want to move to the middle model to get extra support while team members are on vacation. So we've taken a look at what MDR does. Let's now take a look at what it doesn't do. Essentially, it doesn't do all the other IT and security management tasks that are part of defending an organization: patching, deployments, security strategies, user education. MDR doesn't replace MSPs or managed services partners who manage IT tools and infrastructure. And nor does it replace MSSPs, managed security services partners. But MDR services can work really closely with MSPs and MSSPs, and that is exactly what we do at Sophos. We're very proud to work with our partners to protect the customers against advanced threats and to quarterback the MSSP teams. So let's now take a look at the benefits of using MDR services. We've seen why organizations are increasingly adopting MDR services in response to the challenging threat landscape that we face, but there's a lot of benefits from using a service too. And while threat hunting, investigation, and response can be done solely in-house, there are lots of advantages of working with an outsourced partner. The first of which is elevating your cyber defenses. When we've seen the challenges that we face with the threat landscape, it's perhaps not surprising that those enhanced defenses is the #1 benefit that respondents report from using MDR services. One of the major benefits of using an external service over just using in-house resources is the breadth and depth of experience of the analysts. MDR vendors support multiple customers, so they experience a far greater volume and variety of attacks than any individual organization could, giving them a level of expertise that's almost impossible to replicate in-house. Also, because MDR teams are investigating and responding to incidents every day, they have much greater fluency in using the threat hunting tools. And this enables them to respond more quickly and accurately at all stages in the process, from identifying the signals that matter to investigating potential incidents and neutralizing malicious activities. Working as part of a larger team also enables the analysts to share experiences and learnings, further accelerating response. Just an example of this. So the Sophos MDR team collates runbooks for each threat or unique actor that we come across. Once an adversary is identified, rather than needing to carry out widespread research at the time of the attack, the team can leap straight into action. And the runbooks are continually updated with information like the tactics, techniques, and procedures common or specific to a particular attack or threat actor, relevant indicators of compromise, known proofs of concepts for exploits tied to open vulnerabilities, and useful threat hunting queries when dealing with a particular type of attack. And a further advantage of MDR services is that they can apply intelligence from one customer to others that match the same target profile, such as other organizations in the same sector, enabling them to create community immunity for the targeted group. Just to put some numbers on this, I'd like to share with you the average performance stats for the Sophos MDR team. We have a mean time to detect of less than a minute. Our mean time to investigate is 25 minutes, and we go really deep, leveraging the expertise of Sophos XOps. And our mean time to respond is less than 12 minutes, giving a total resolution time of 38 minutes. So being able to stop threats in these sort of timescales transforms your defenses, protecting you against even the most advanced attacks. And the greater breadth and depth of experience and ability to apply learnings across our customers' environments enables the Sophos MDR team to elevate organizations' defenses above and beyond what they could achieve solely in-house, as these quotes demonstrate. I'd like to highlight the one at the top from Chitale Daria, customer in India, who said tangible returns from using Sophos MDR include a 90% reduction in time to detect high-risk threats that require investigation, a 95% reduction in time to identify the source of attack and type of threats, and improved accuracy of detections. A second key benefit of using an MDR service is the time that it frees up for you. Threat hunting is time-consuming and unpredictable. For IT professionals juggling multiple tasks and priorities, it can be hard to keep up with the challenge. And given the potential impact of an attack, when something suspicious is detected, you need to drop everything so you can investigate and act on it immediately. And the urgent nature of the work can prevent you from focusing on more strategic and, frankly, often more interesting challenges. Working with an MDR service enables you to free up IT capacity to support business-focused initiatives. And when I speak to Sophos MDR customers, this is probably on a day-to-day basis, the single biggest advantage that they talk about. In fact, they can say it better than me, as you can see in these quotes. But a couple that I'd like to call out specifically. Firstly, the one from London's South Bank University in the UK. Using MDR services is not about replacing the IT team, rather it's about enabling the IT team to better focus on activities that will help achieve the organization's goals. In this case, improving student satisfaction, which in turn improves student recruitment. And the second quote I'd like to highlight is from the Fresh Market, a customer who is in the US, a retail chain. As they highlight, through using our MDR service, they've been able to focus on proactively elevating their defenses in other ways and maturing their overall security posture. A third benefit reported by organizations using MDR services is 24/7 peace of mind. An attack can come at any time, and threat hunting and response is a round-the-clock task. If you only do it during office hours, you're leaving your organization greatly exposed. By providing 24/7 coverage, MDR services provide considerable reassurance and peace of mind. For IT teams, this can literally mean being able to sleep better at night, being able to relax knowing that the buck stops with the MDR provider, not them, and that they can regain their evenings and weekends. And this is true both for IT teams that fully outsource their threat hunting and response and those who supplement and extend their own teams with MDR services. I think this quote from Vancouver Canucks, a customer in Canada, says it very well. Having the MDR team behind me helps me sleep better at night. For senior leaders and customers, 24/7 expert coverage and a high level of cyber readiness at all times provides powerful reassurance that the data and the organization as a whole is well protected. Another advantage of using an MDR service is that it takes away the challenge of needing to recruit in specialist threat hunters. Threat hunting is a highly complex operation. Individuals in this space need to possess a quite specific and niche set of skills. Typically, they are people who are creative and curious. Looking for threats can be akin to looking for a needle in a haystack. They have experiences in cybersecurity, and they also have good knowledge of the threat landscape and the latest threat trends. They have that adversarial mindset, the ability to think like an attacker, and they're able to write technically. They have good knowledge of operating systems and networking, and experience of coding to build programs, automate tasks, pass logs, and carry out data analysis. This is a rare combination of competencies exacerbated by a skills shortage in the IT sector. And this can make it really hard, if not impossible, to recruit in the necessary expertise for many organizations. MDR services provide that expertise for you. They recruit, develop, and support threat hunting and response experts. At Sophos, we have hundreds of analysts located around the globe, providing continuous service for our customers. Sophos MDR enables our customers to expand their security operations capabilities without expanding their headcount. And I love this quote from Hammond Care, a customer in Australia. They say that they now have an extension of their existing security practice without needing to build their own in-house capability. And then finally, when we're talking about the top benefits of using an MDR service, we come to the ROI point. MDR services make a lot of sense from an ROI perspective too. Firstly, let's compare setting up an in-house team with outsourcing to an MDR provider. Through leveraging economies of scale, MDR services provide a cost-effective way to secure your organization and let your cybersecurity budget go further. As this quote here from Detmold Group in Australia says, the Sophos MDR service provides the coverage of 6 people for the cost of less than 1. Secondly, by elevating protection, MDR services also greatly reduce the risk of experiencing a costly data breach or ransomware event, avoiding the financial pain of dealing with a major incident. As we saw earlier, the average cost of remediating a ransomware attack in mid-sized organizations comes in at $1.4 million. So investing in prevention makes wise financial sense. And thirdly, if you use an MDR provider that also provides endpoint or other cybersecurity offerings, you can enjoy considerable financial advantages from consolidating with a single vendor. Rather than paying one vendor for endpoint protection and another for MDR, by working with the same vendor for both, you can reduce your license costs and also your day-to-day vendor management overheads. And one final but really important point on the ROI front. By choosing a vendor that integrates with your current security technologies, you can increase return on your existing investments, make them work harder for you, get more from them. At Sophos, we have a vendor-agnostic approach to MDR, providing managed detection and response for any environment. We can take signals from our Sophos next-gen tools using our natively integrated XDR from our firewall, endpoint, cloud, email, and more. And we can take signals from pretty much any other security technology through our highly compatible hybrid XDR, just some examples here on screen. And we can do a combination of the two. So whichever technologies you're using in your existing environment, we can use them to help hunt down threats, increase your defenses, and increase your ROI. So to just sum that up, the top 5 benefits reported by users of MDR services are improved cyber defenses, freeing up IT capacity, that 24/7 peace of mind, the ability to add expertise rather than headcount, and improved cybersecurity ROI. Now, I've mentioned Sophos MDR quite a few times during this session, and I want to wrap up with an overview of our offering. You've already heard from our customers about their experiences with our service and the benefits they enjoy. Sophos MDR provides proactive human-led threat hunting, powerful threat detection using XDR tools, and full instant investigation and remediation. We have over 12,000 customers, and that number is growing literally daily. A major principle of Sophos MDR is compatibility. Sophos MDR meets you where you are. From a people perspective, we can completely manage threat response for you, we can co-manage it with your team, or we can alert your team to threats that require action. When it comes to the processes, we can fully eliminate the threat for you, we can contain the threat so your team can eliminate it, or we can provide you with a detailed alert and remediation guidance. And as we just looked at, we can use our technologies, non-Sophos technologies, or a combination of the two. We include free integrations with any endpoint protection platform with our service, as well as the option to purchase add-on integration packs for virtually any security tool that generates threat detection data, firewalls, emails, and more. And because we can take signals from across your environment, we can deliver faster, better response. Communication is key with MDR services, and at Sophos we provide weekly and monthly reports so you can see what we're doing on your behalf, and also share with your senior leaders so they too know that we've got your back. And we're really proud of our customer experience too. We're the highest rated and most reviewed vendor across MDR, endpoint, and firewall on Gartner Peer Insights as of August 1st, 2022. So that's independent Gartner verified customer feedback. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope you found this session useful. I hope you've gained understanding into why organizations are increasingly turning to MDR services and the benefits that organizations are enjoying from using a third-party MDR provider. And if this session has made you think you'd like to consider Sophos MDR for your organization, do speak to your Sophos representative to discuss what's right for you, or check out Sophos MDR on our website. So thank you very much for your time today, and wishing you a very happy and successful rest of your day. Thank you.
Great presentation, Sally. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you to our friends at Sophos for educating our audience on the state of ransomware in 2023. I encourage you to check out the handouts tab there for additional information. And of course, visit sophos.com to learn more. With that, it's now my pleasure to announce the winner of our Amazon $250 gift card prize. This gift card is going out to Thomas Bezak, who is a director of IT in Michigan. Congratulations, Thomas Bezak in Michigan. We'll be contacting you to deliver your Amazon $250 gift card. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us on the webinar today. I hope that you learned a lot and have a great day. See you next time. Bye-bye.